Hello and welcome to this episode of Leading with Integrity in honour of International Leadership Week 2025. So this week we have a few things going on in honour of that. My second favourite, possibly, maybe first, joint first maybe. But anyway, one of my favourite weeks of the year is International Leadership Week. So to celebrate this year, we have our regularly scheduled episode on Wednesday, where I have a great conversation about modes of work, the future of work and skills, and all sorts of other things around remote and changing communication styles and so on, with my guest on Wednesday, Craig Matson, at 9:30 in the morning UK time on Wednesday. I will be running my Finding Your Leadership Values workshop. We're doing this now as a pay what you feel workshop, so it's not free, but you can join for a $5 or less if you like. And it's a very interactive workshop, so the more the merrier. We'll have some interactive elements using some technology, which should be cool. No spoilers though. We'll also have some breakout rooms if we get enough people, but definitely there will be some interactivity, some conversation starters. Then today we're going to be talking about what International Leadership Week is all about this year, which is your leadership legacy.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast.
Leadership talk for the modern manager.
With your host, David Hatch.
So this short episode today, it's relatively unscripted, as you may be able to tell. But what I thought would be useful would be to refer to the Institute of Leadership's very own website on this subject. Every year they pick a theme for Leadership Week. And this year, as I say, it is legacy. So what will your leadership legacy be? It is a topic that's come up on the podcast a few times over the years. There's been some interesting perspectives on it. And for me, I think one of the most meaningful, impactful thing that we can do as leaders is creating other leaders, creating the space for the next generation of leader to do better than you did, for example. And that was an idea that we heard earlier this year from guest Alex Sanfilippo. So my question to you in the audience, listeners and viewers, is what do you want your leadership legacy to be? One of the quotes that I found myself thinking about quite often in the last year or two is the quite famous one from Maya Angelou about, and I'm just going to read it out to you rather than try and butcher it or trust my sometimes failing memory. So the quote is this: I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, the context of that quote probably wasn't to do with leadership, and yet it is so relevant, so powerful for leaders in terms of our everyday behaviours, in terms of what we want to achieve in our jobs, but also our legacy as leaders. What happens when we're no longer there? For whatever reason, whether we've moved on to our next role, started our own businesses, started our next own business, or just retired, or, maybe the worst has happened. So if there's not something that you're thinking about, maybe put some thought into it this week at least, because it does matter. It does have an impact on how you show up as a leader, I think, if you're thinking about that legacy and about what comes next for your people, if not for yourself. So on the Institute of Leadership's website, they've listed a load of questions to answer to help you think about this. And I thought it might be helpful, interesting, prompt a bit of thought perhaps if I go through some of those. I'm not going to do all of them because I don't want to turn this into a 4-hour episode. So the goal of this one is to be short and sweet and just provoke a bit of thought and give you some places to go to learn more, to start thinking about your own legacy. Now, for me, I think the first place you've got to start with really anything you think about with leadership is in those values. Like, what is it about your leadership? What is it that drives you to do it? Why are you doing it? What do you want your leadership to look like, sound like, feel like to the people you're leading and others as well? Now, I'm quite fortunate in that I'm a business of one. Therefore, my business values are my personal values. So that makes it a little bit easier for me. But I think if you are in an employed role where your business has its own set of values, actually this can be quite a good way of making sure you're in the right place as well, that you're in the right organisation. If there's a clear misalignment between personal and corporate values, that tells you something, doesn't it? But anyway, that's off topic. So for me, there are 4 values behind leading with integrity, behind what I do on this podcast, what I do career-wise, what I do with the business. And those are, firstly, people before profit, which is no surprise, I think, if you're a long-time listener. I often say, leading with integrity is about people-first leadership. We talk about this quite a lot with various guests. This idea that a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, managers even have and get stuck on in their leadership is that their purpose is there for the revenue, for the numbers, for the dollar signs, the pound signs, etc. And we forget too easily, I've done this, I've made this mistake as well. I think we all have. We too easily forget that actually none of those metrics are going to be achieved without those people anyway. But also, who wants to work in that kind of environment where the numbers drive everything and that people are secondary, that empathy, that emotions, that caring for people come after making money? Yes, of course, every business has to be making money to survive and to keep employing those people and to be able to do all of these things like supporting them and caring for them and providing them that safe working environment. But I think it's a cyclical relationship almost. It's not a cause and effect, or at least not in that direction. So for me, it's always been about, if you take care of those people first, everything else will come. And if you don't take care of those people, then all of those other things are less likely to happen anyway. So that's why people before profit is a foundational value for leading with integrity. Plus some of my prior experiences, which again, long-term listeners may know something about, really led me down this path, because I've seen what happens in organizations where you don't do this. And I'm sure many of you have worked in those kinds of companies too. And they're unpleasant, they're depressing, they're stressful, they lead to burnout and disengagement from the staff, and ultimately people leave. So that's the first one. Second one is following through. I think something else that all too often we do as leaders, as managers, and that we've experienced from our own bosses too over the years, it's very easy to sit in a room, give someone the opportunity to vent, rant, give feedback, whichever polite term works best for you, and to give the appearance of listening. Maybe even be listening in the moment. But actually the true power of listening, the true responsibility of leadership is what you do next after you've heard about, let's say, the problem or the challenge or the idea that somebody wants to run with. Because if you just sit in that room, nod your head, smile, even take notes, make the right noises, and then as soon as you're out of that conversation, you forget all about it, you never do anything afterwards. You can only do that so many times before people realise there's no point having that conversation. This leader is not here to help me. They are not going to do anything for me. They're not going to support my ideas, help me with my challenges. And that's why follow through is so important. We talk again a lot about leading by example on this podcast and in my wider work on leadership. It's one of those things. It's simple, it's not easy, but a big part of leading by example has to be that you follow up, you follow through. If somebody comes to you and expresses something like that, an idea, a challenge, a mistake, even a failure that's happened, what you do next is the most important thing. Anyway, so I guess the roundabout way of saying the most important part of listening is following up on what you hear. Because that shows that A, you really were listening, and B, that you care enough about the person who said whatever it is they've said to you to do something about it. And that is so important for leadership, for building trust, for showing and earning respect as well. And it's just something that I think all of us in life, as well as in leadership and management, can stand to think more about. The third value of leading with integrity, and this is the one that I find easiest, to be honest, especially with the podcast, is enjoyment. We spend a third or more of our lives at work, in the workplace, doing our jobs or running our businesses. So if you're not enjoying it, if you're not having fun, really, like, what is the point? Yes, we've all got to pay the bills. Yes, we've got to keep the roof over our heads, feed ourselves, feed the kids, whatever. But again, like when we think about things like stress, burnout, longevity of teams and organizations and relationships at work, if there isn't that element of fun, of humor, of the ability to not take things too seriously all the time, then you will get things like disengagement, burnout, higher turnover of staff, because nobody wants to work in those places for the long term. So make it fun, enjoy what you're doing, and if you're not, either make a change if you can, as in without leaving, or leave. Go and find something else that does light you up. The leadership aspect of this is thinking about the kind of environment that you are creating, the example that you're setting within that environment, and whether you're making space for that enjoyment, for that fun, for that silliness even sometimes. Because it is a very powerful leadership behavior if you can do it right. And of course, as with all things, there is a balance to be had. But anyway, so that's the third. And then the fourth and final one really is this collaborative aspect. Too many traditional approaches, definitions even of leadership and of management as well, to be fair, is focused on this sort of top-down, very authoritarian structure of I'm in charge, I make the decisions, you just go and implement and do as I say, and that's what the team is there for. And I think, you know, in a lot of contexts that probably works. It's not a great place to work usually. It's not going to inspire anyone to do their best work or to innovate or be creative, but, you know, it probably gets the job done. But it's uninspiring. I think, in my experiences as well, I'm sure listener and viewer, you've probably had similar experiences of this. If you can actually step over that line, be more collaborative, be more questioning and curious in your approach to work and your interactions with people that in the traditional view would be seen as subordinates, then actually you can unlock the power of those things like creativity and innovation and new ways of doing things, better ways, more efficient ways, more productive ways, and your whole team becomes more powerful, productive as a result. The impact of collaborative leadership is not to be underestimated. And it includes things like being open with people, vulnerable, authentic, trusting as much as you require trust, and sharing success, like not hogging the credit, giving out that success, also sharing in the mistakes and when things go wrong. So there's a whole massive element around collaboration in leadership. And I think it is one of those challenges that, especially when we're new to it and we don't know a better way of doing things, and we maybe don't have the confidence to take a risk, especially if you're working in that kind of traditional leadership environment. So yeah, there we go. That's why collaboration is the fourth value of leading with integrity. And of course, for the podcast, I hope, at least if you've heard any of our previous episodes, all four of these values have come through pretty strongly. It's all about people first leadership. We follow through, we live up to promises, we lead by example. I hope it's pretty clear that I enjoy what I'm doing with the podcast and with leadership as well. And with the guest and interview format, I think we're doing pretty well on the collaboration value as well. Every episode, every week, in fact. Except this one, obviously. But anyway. So with those values in mind, the big question for International Leadership Week this week is, what do you want your leadership legacy to be? Who do you hope to inspire? Who do you want to positively impact through your leadership? What kind of difference do you want to make in the lives of your team, your community? And so for me, it's about spreading good leadership, great leadership, inspirational leaders. I've said this before many times, but in any group of business owners, employees, people generally, anyone who's had jobs, if I ask the question, hands up if you've ever experienced a bad manager or a toxic leader, or just an unpleasant workplace? The majority of people in most rooms will raise their hand at that question. If I ask the second question, flip it on its head, okay, how many of you feel like you've worked for a great leader, been truly inspired by a manager that you've encountered, or even a colleague? It's usually a lot fewer hands get raised at that point. Anecdotally, about 50% less. And so leading with integrity is here to flip that narrative. That is my grand vision, my grand goal for what we're doing with the podcast, with the Integrity Leaders community, with the leadership development work and courses that I deliver as well. Because leadership is a privilege, it's a responsibility, it can be a joy as well. And so if you're not able to realize those elements, something's going wrong somewhere. And again, if we spend a third of our lives at work, shouldn't it be an enjoyable, bearable, inspiring place to be? I don't think anyone wants anything else, do they? They may not admit it, but anyway, so that's why leadership matters to me. That is the kind of legacy that I want to have for leading with integrity. I recognize it's going to be a long road. I may not get there, but as long as I can make progress towards it before it's my turn to leave this world, I'll be able to do so with a smile on my face. So now it's your turn, listener, viewer. Pop in the comments. What do you want your legacy to be as a leader? What do you want people to think about your leadership in years' time? What feelings do you want people to remember years into the future after they no longer work with you? How do you want them to remember your leadership and their time working with you? Because once you answer that question, I think everything you do as a leader gets a lot easier, because you know what you want to achieve and it's a lot easier to realize it at that point. So I think that's probably a good place to end the episode. Do join us again on Wednesday for the episode with Craig Matson. It is a great conversation. It doesn't really touch on legacy so much, but we recorded it months ago. So it was before I was thinking about this. Nevertheless, there are some great things in there, I think, about the way that we handle communication at work, and that is very relevant to the values and to the legacy question that we talked about today in terms of how you're going to implement that and how you're going to realize it at work. And also, he was just a great guy to converse with. So I think that really comes out from the conversation. Highly recommend you join us. So something else we're doing this week for International Leadership Week, I'm running at 9:30 in the morning UK time on Wednesday, which is the 26th, I believe. Check my dates. Yes, it's the 26th. So I will be running my Finding Your Leadership Values workshop. We're doing this now as a pay what you feel workshop. So it's not free, but you can join for a $5 or less if you like. It's really up to you what you think the value of it is going to be. And it's a very interactive workshop. So the more the merrier. We'll have some interactive elements using some technology, which should be cool. No spoilers though. We'll also have some breakout rooms if we get enough people. But definitely there will be some interactivity, some conversation starters. The goal of the workshop is to get you to a point where you've recognized your top 3 leadership values. And those are, of course, important and relevant for reasons I've already talked about today, but knowing your values has to be a key step along the way to understanding, planning, and realizing your leadership legacy. So we will get there. We will start off with identifying your leadership hero. You're listening to the podcast, so hopefully you know that every week, every guest, I ask them to name their leadership hero, that person that for them perfectly embodies leadership. And so we're going to do that for you as well, listener or viewer. We will take you through those steps. And if you are really stuck for ideas beforehand, or you wanted to get a jump on that conversation, you're welcome to visit the website in advance as well. Take that leadership quiz. Which will also help you identify your hero. So anyway, once you've got a hero, sci-fi themed ones are encouraged but not mandatory, I should add as well. We then think about, with that hero, what are their values? What is it about their behaviors, their actions as a leader that inspires your leadership? And then that leads us down the path of finding your leadership values. So I hope you'll be there to join us if you can, if you're in the right time zone anyway. If not, do feel free to visit the website. There are future workshops planned. We do those 3 or 4 times a year, and you're welcome to register for our future one as well. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you on Wednesday. Have a great International Leadership Week. Do check out all of the links that I'll put in the show notes as well, including the links to the Institute of Leadership's own website. They're running some great events this week too, so highly encourage you to take advantage of some of those. It's a great week. It's one of my favourite weeks, as I've said, so make sure you get the most out of it. Leadership, learning, and legacy. So until we speak again, stay safe. Start thinking about that legacy that you want for your leadership, and be a leader, not a boss.